Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of the daily reading from the One Year Bible. This week we're focusing on the subject of parenting. My name's Mizell, and I'm joined by Wendy, Korbusieski, and Chris Rexroad. And today we're going to look at one of the most fascinating stories in the Bible that many people probably have never heard. So we're going to take turns and read the entire story right from the Word. So 2 Samuel 21, beginning in verse 1, it says, "There was a famine during David's reign that lasted for 3 years. So David asked the Lord about it. And the Lord said, 'The famine has come because Saul and his family are guilty of murdering the Gibeonites.' So the king summoned the Gibeonites. They were not part of Israel, but were all that was left of the nation of the Amorites. The people of Israel had sworn not to kill them, but Saul, in his zeal for Israel and Judah, had tried to wipe them out. David asked them, 'What can I do for you? How can I make amends so that you will bless the Lord's people again?'"
Well, money can't settle this matter between us and the family of Saul, the Gibeonites replied. Neither can we demand the life of anyone in Israel. What can I do then? David asked. Just tell me and I will do it for you. They replied, "It was Saul who planned to destroy us, to keep us from having any place at all in the territory of Israel. So let 7 of Saul's sons be handed over to us, and we will execute them before the Lord at Gibeon on the mountain of the Lord." "All right," the king said, "I will do it." The king spared Jonathan's son Mephibosheth, who was Saul's grandson, because of the oath David and Jonathan had sworn before the Lord. But he gave them Saul's 2 sons, Aramoni and Mephibosheth, whose mother was Rizpeh, daughter of Aiah. He also gave them the 5 sons of Saul's daughter Meribah, the wife of Adriel, son of Barzillai. I'm going to get it out. Barzillai, from Maholiah. The men of Gibeon executed them on the mountain before the Lord. So all 7 of them died together at the beginning of the barley harvest.
Then Rizpeh, daughter of Aiah, mother of 2 men, spread burlap on a rock and stayed there the entire harvest season. She prevented the scavenger birds from tearing at the bodies during the day and stopped wild animals from eating them at night. When David learned what Rizpeh, Saul's concubine, had done, he went to the people at Jeshbah Gilead and retrieved the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan. When the Philistines had killed Saul and Jonathan at Mount Gilboa, the people of Jabesh Gilead stole their bodies from the public square at Bethshan, where the Philistines had hung them. So David obtained the bones of Saul and Jonathan, as well as the bones of the men of the Gibeonites, the bones of the men the Gibeonites had executed. Then the king ordered that they bury the bones in the tomb of Kish, Saul's father, at the town of Zelah in the land of Benjamin. After that, God ended the famine in the land.
So this is really an incredible story. In order to make amends to the Gibeonites for an injustice by King Saul, which would have been years prior, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who was the king just before David. David agreed to give 7 descendants of Saul over the Gibeonites for execution. This is something we don't even comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain degree, we've seen this play out, and when it makes the news, we're all repulsed by it. I'm thinking about the reporter, maybe from the Washington Times in the last few years, who pretty much was given up by Turkey at the embassy there, and the
exchange,
and they cut him into pieces and carried him out in bags. That's how they got him out of the building, and they didn't catch it. They were like,
right.
Where did he go?
Yeah.
We're repulsed by it, but this isn't a common. It probably is common, but not in our culture. It's not common.
Right.
It's more common in places around the world. But instead of burying them, their bodies were left on poles outside in the harvest field. And a woman named Rizpeh, who was the mother of the two of the men who were executed, she kept a vigil at night and day throughout the barley harvest, so the birds, the scavenger birds, and the wild animals wouldn't eat their bodies. It's a picture of incredible sacrifice by a mother. So Wendy, what caught your attention about this story?
Well, some of our listeners might not understand the importance of the Jewish culture about burying the dead, and so there was really some really important reasons why this was important for them. So according to the Torah, there were some clear reasons outlined for taking care of dead bodies. So in Genesis, in 1:27, burial was a fundamental act of respect because a person was made in God's image, and so this was an act of dignity, number one, to bury the dead. And then it was also important in Jewish law because contact with a dead body made a person unclean, and you can find that in Numbers 19. So burying the dead was important to keep you from accidentally coming in contact with a dead body. And then the law also declared that an unburied body defiled the land. That you can find that in Deuteronomy 21. So the land was considered a sacred gift from God. So you had to keep the land sacred as well. And so in Jewish law, the thought was that burying the dead is a supreme act of kindness and grace because it's a service that a dead person could never pay back. Yeah. So all of those reasons.
That's extremely interesting. But Chris, what do you think Rizpeh's motivation was for keeping a 3-month vigil? A 3-month vigil. Was she just overcome with grief?
Well, I mean, in one sense, she was fighting for the honor of God. I mean, we read in Deuteronomy 21:22 through 23 that not only insisted that the death should be buried, or the dead should be buried, it's insisted on burying the dead the same day, so the land won't be defiled, as Wendy just said. I think she was also fighting for her son's individual honor. Right. I mean, no mother wants to see, their sons left outside on a pole, just out there for birds and animals, to be seen every day. It was a great dishonor, and must have been very painful for the mom and her mother's heart. And on top of this, the 7 men were descendants of King Saul. This would have been viewed as a curse upon the former king's family. I mean, the irony in this story is that the mother had no political pull, no power, no way to sway the king directly. The one thing she did have was a determination to fight for the honor of her sons.
Right. And I think that's an awesome picture of a mother, like for every parent listening to this podcast who's fighting for your children. I just want to encourage you, don't stop fighting. And if I can draw an application from the story, fight until you get the attention of the king, right? Fight until he pays attention. Keep fighting for your family until the Lord answers your prayers. Right. That is a spiritual warfare conversation, right? That we talked about a few weeks back. How can parents fight for their children spiritually?
I think you just alluded to that spiritual warfare, that we're not fighting against flesh and blood, that prayer is our number one way to battle for our kids, that parents are in a spiritual battle for the hearts, minds, souls, the future of their children, and that's the number one way to advocate for their kids is that spiritual warfare. And I think that's part of what Rizpeh was doing here. That vigil was kind of a picture of that intercessory prayer. She stayed vigilant. She stayed in place despite her exhaustion, despite the opposition, despite, the physical things that were coming against her, the birds, the wild beasts. She stayed in place. She was vigilant. She wasn't giving up. And that's a picture for us in that spiritual battle, not to give up.
And definitely, teaching our kids about Jesus through our actions, our responses to situations in life. We want to be able to protect them from everything, but it's okay for them to see sometimes something new comes along that it wasn't spelled out how to handle this, but because I know the character of Christ, the character of God, it helps me know how to navigate this tough situation. Something as extreme as sticking by your kids and trying to get the king's attention, here to something as simple as how to deal with harsh people in this world that you run across.
Outside of prayer, number one advice to parents is model whatever it is that you want them to see. That's one of the greatest fights that you can win, is because most of what they're going to do is caught, not taught.
Right.
You're not going to sit them down. I mean, there are certain things you sit them down and teach them, but they're going to watch them play out, right? You can teach them not to smoke, but the best way to teach them not to smoke is not to smoke.
Not do it.
Right?
That's right.
You can teach them not to cuss, but the best way to teach them not to cuss is not to cuss. You can teach them to love and to care for people, to do the right thing, but the best way to teach them to do that is for you to do it. And I think that is the greatest gift we can give to our children, and it is also one of the things that I don't understand about why God designed life, because I am better suited to do that as a grandparent than I was as a parent. As a parent, I had so many other things, right? I see some people who I think are exceptional parents young, but for the most part, young parents are ignorant of many things. They're chasing after a career, trying to establish themselves in life. They're trying to understand some things. People say, well, you do things different as a grandparent. Sure you do, because you figured out some things just aren't worth, the effort.
Right.
And other things are. And you learn that modeling is the number one thing, right? Not saying it, doing it.
Yeah.
And I think outside of prayer and modeling, I think having your kids involved in a church community, allowing community to speak into the lives of your children. I think your village.
But you've got to be present.
Right.
Look, we can get on here and harp about all of the things, that distract people. But I talk to parents frequently, and they want somebody to rescue their kid out of harm.
No.
And the problem is, well, why wasn't this a priority years ago? Right? You could have put them in a position where they had that community for people to help rescue them. Now you want somebody to develop a relationship to whom they're going to be completely resistant. Right? They're going to spot the youth pastor coming a mile away. Mama sent you, didn't she? You're going to.
They're on the list. They're not the top of the list, right? But that needs to be on the list.
But that's part of that modeling.
Exactly.
It's a frequent conversation. There used not to be options
because the parents need community too. Yeah, that needs to be modeled.
Yeah, at our last church, that was something that I was really trying to instill into the parents, because I oversaw youth, is that you're their first minister, you're their first pastor. I'm here to help support you guys. So let me know what I can do to pour into you guys and to your kids, but they need to be looking at you primarily.
About 25 years ago, well, it's probably longer than that now, 27, 28 years ago, I heard a guy preach a message on this text, and the context was, we as parents have to be willing to shoo the vultures away from our kids' lives. So metaphor, that's if we draw some applications from the story metaphorically, what might some wild beasts and scavenger birds in this story represent today that we need to be intentional about shooing away from our?
But for me, like those scavenger birds are things like corrupting influences, the things that can swoop in, things like media, peer pressure, social norms, things that can erode their faith, shame, comparison, those kind of things. The wild beasts to me are those more aggressive things like addiction, abuse, trauma, rebellion, those kind of cycles of generational dysfunction, those kind of more forceful things. And we have to be charged as gatekeepers for our kids, for their hearts and minds. We're reading a book by Paul David Tripp, right now, and this didn't come from this book that we're reading right now as a staff, but he wrote this in a different place. He said, culture preaches to your kids every day, but we have to counter preach to them with love, grace, and truth against those very things, against those scavenger birds, against those wild beasts, because they're coming.
Just looking at all this, picking out one of them that's been a problem for probably the last 10 years that really came to a head was, gender identity, just creating, confusion in kids and it being indoctrinated into, even school systems and stuff like that, to where, it was something that was kind of hard to battle against, because it got to the point, still kind of is, that if you're against this, you hate people. The same kind of twist that's put on a lot of different things, and that's just one of them. But that and social anxiety, that probably led before this and is still out there. But just trying to help them battle with those things.
I posted a reel yesterday from CNBC. They're teaching classes now, and then colleges are going to pick up teaching these classes. How to talk on the phone. We are raising a generation who has never talked on the phone, right? They've never talked to people. They don't know how to have a conversation on the telephone. And they're so anxious.
Oh,
you
wow.
talk about the social anxiety.
Yeah.
They're so anxious, so they don't answer their phone. They don't talk because they've never done it. What do I say? What do I do? How do I have a conversation with somebody? It's a real thing. Some of it is self-imposed. We in a staff conversation yesterday, there are some good things that come out of the social media. There are also some bad things. And I think we have to be aware of, how we address, specifically where children, you use the word, the topic of gender identity. That's a complicated conversation to have, but it shouldn't be left in the hands of children, right? You can't leave those decisions in. You don't let them decide some other things, right? Whether to carry a knife or a gun or to cook, right? You're like, no, you can't do that. Well, why can't I? Well, there are reasons why. They're not prepared to make certain decisions, right? When you're prepared to make that decision, I don't know, but you're not prepared certainly as a child. And I think we have to be intentional. And the hard part is, even as parents, right? Because I see parents who don't want their kids to do things, but they also don't want the social pressure put on their kid from keeping them from doing so. So they give in to allow their kids to go. I was not allowed to go to parties, and my dad didn't care. I wasn't allowed. There was a long list of things I couldn't do.
Couldn't go swimming.
Right. But it was, I got invited to parties, but he was like, no, I know what happens. I'm keeping you from that. You can go do this, right? But you're not going there. And in hindsight, I hated it then. Right? I was mad. I hated it. But today, I'm thankful. Right? Because I see some of my friends who developed habits between 15, 16, 17, and 18 that they never were able to break. Right. They were introduced to things that they were either genetically predisposed to or personality predisposed to, that they fell into a trap that they never escaped, right? I have a friend right now who is a high capacity. I went to high school with him. He started drinking when he was in high school. He was a partier. And he can't escape it. He's a high-capacity leader, but he is a high-capacity alcoholic at the same time. There's a word for it. Is it closet functioning?
High-functioning.
High-functioning. Yeah, he's a high-functioning alcoholic. And it's ruined his relationships, his life, but it all started because there were parents who said, this is normal. It doesn't have to be normal, right? Don't allow, somebody else to dictate that. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue a conversation around our daily Bible reading from the One Year Bible.